The horizon is a brilliant blue. Oh, that view is tremendous.
His name is John Glenn, Jr., and this is his biography. I'm Mike Wallace. This is Biography. Our story, Colonel John Glenn, Jr. As the first American to orbit the Earth, Marine pilot John Glenn has been accorded adulation unequaled since the epic flight of Charles Lindbergh. Glenn, however, has found, as Lindbergh did, that a popular hero must shoulder an awesome, sometimes an unwelcome burden of responsibility. Said one of Glenn's close friends, John tries to behave as if every youngster in the nation were watching him every moment of every day. February 1962. The successful orbital flight of astronaut John Glenn has triggered a celebration seldom equaled in American history. Today, he is the nation's hero. Glenn himself, however, insists there is nothing supernatural about being an astronaut. He says we can and do grow up anywhere. John Glenn's early years are spent in the quiet countryside which surrounds the small town of New Concord, Ohio. He is the only child of modest and deeply devoted parents. The model airplane craze of the early 1930s intrigues young Glenn, but it is more than a fad with him. These small, temperamental machines offer him his first real taste of the fascinating world of flight. By 1941, Glenn and a group of college classmates are training for their own pilot's licenses. Says the 20-year-old enthusiast, I was sold on flying as soon as I had a taste of it. John Glenn and his college sweetheart, Anna Castor, postpone their marriage plans when the United States is suddenly plunged into World War II. Days after the start of the war, Glenn volunteers for pilot training, and he winds up as a Marine flyer. Glenn flies more than 50 fighter missions against the Japanese. A young, confident pilot, he sees air combat as a personal challenge. Coming out of the war a seasoned aviator, he decides to become a career Marine pilot. When the Korean War erupts, John Glenn finds himself facing action once again. Every time you fly in combat, you go out into an unknown, he says. You learn to take action almost by instinct. In the last 9 days of the Korean War, Glenn shoots down 3 communist MiGs, and his fellow pilots dub him the MiG-Mad Marine. In 1957, Marine test pilot John Glenn becomes the first man to fly coast to coast faster than the speed of sound. He blazes a new transcontinental record of 3 hours and 23 minutes. Glenn's wife and 2 youngsters greet him at Floyd Bennett Field. Everything went as smooth as silk, he says. I'd like to try it all over again tomorrow. Soon after his celebrated flight, Glenn volunteers for a special assignment with NASA, the newly created National Aeronautics and Space Administration. The NASA program to put a man in orbit around the Earth is still in the planning stages, and John Glenn takes part in some of the early tests of man's ability to survive in space. Says Glenn, space travel is at the frontier of my profession, and I want to be in on it. The boy who learned to fly a biplane above an Ohio meadow now rides a giant centrifuge that simulates some of the effects of space flight. A concentrated search for potential astronauts is launched early in 1959, when NASA's Man in Space program, Project Mercury, is officially announced. Hundreds of military test pilots are screened in an effort to find what one official terms a group of ordinary supermen. Says one observer, the astronauts must be part pilot and part guinea pig, and they must be devoid of emotional flaws. The list of potential astronauts gradually narrows to 100, then to 32, and finally to 7. 7 men who physically, mentally, emotionally are prepared to enter the world of the future.
It's my pleasure to introduce to you, and I consider it a very real honor, gentlemen. From your right, Malcolm S. Carpenter, Leroy G. Cooper, John H. Glenn, Virgil I. Grissom, Walter M. Shearer, Alan B. Shepard, Donald K. Slayton. These, ladies and gentlemen, are the nation's Mercury astronauts.
The astronauts are from different backgrounds, from different branches of the service, but they have a common love for adventure. Says Glenn, the dare of the future is an exciting idea to me. Overnight, the Mercury astronauts become the center of national interest. A major magazine buys the rights to their personal stories for a reported $500,000. And their lives, thoughts, and ambitions are made as familiar to the public as those of Hollywood celebrities. The astronauts, however, take the publicity in stride and stick to a rigid program of physical fitness. Among these 7 Mercury astronauts, a binding friendship begins to build. They now meet the missile makers and absorb a fundamental knowledge of their exotic new world, a world of booster engines, space capsules, and delicate guidance systems. It is a time, however, when the missile age is still in its infancy. The involved mechanisms on which their lives will depend are still far from perfected. Despite occasional, if spectacular, failures of test rockets, Glenn and the other astronauts remain confident about the ultimate success of their mission.
I have all the faith in the world in the people running this thing. If we didn't think that we had the finest brains in the country working on this thing, I'm sure all of us would look at it with a pretty jaundiced eye here.
As the months pass, the astronauts learn the specifics of the space age. Gradually, they become familiar with the intricacies of orbital flight. The simple act of swimming even takes on new significance. It helps develop body control and simulates the eerie sensation of zero gravity in space, weightlessness. Like nightmarish carnival rides, giant simulators teach space capsule maneuvers. The astronauts learn firsthand the meaning of yaw, pitch, and roll. They learn to control violent capsule gyrations that might occur in space. By 1961, the 7 Mercury astronauts are preparing for the first manned suborbital test flight, and they have narrowed their training to specific areas of the mission.
My area of specialization is the cockpit area, or in other words, the pilot's working space, and this includes such things as the instrumentation, the way the information is presented to the pilot, operation of emergency switches, how we want these laid out. In other words, optimizing the pilot's layout and the pilot's workspace in the vehicle.
John Glenn is described as almost ascetic in his pursuit of perfection. Throughout his training, he has been the only astronaut who has lived alone, away from his family. He allows himself to see his wife and teenage children, David and Carolyn, only on weekends. Glenn is aware of the hazards of his career. He says that he could do other jobs that could increase his life expectancy. But for him, space exploration is bigger than anything in the world. With risks, he says, you gain. April 12, 1961, the United States loses the race to be first into space. But within weeks, Project Mercury is ready. Astronaut Alan Shepard will be the first American spaceman. At the Cape Canaveral blockhouse, John Glenn, acting as Shepard's backup pilot, goes over the final checklist before liftoff. Everything seems ready. All systems are go. Alan Shepard waits for the signal that will unleash a force equivalent to more than 3 million horsepower. In the next few moments, he will be singled out for a unique place in history as the first American in space. Cape Canaveral, a new phrase is born in the American language. Everything is A-OK. Cape Canaveral, Florida, February 1962. The countdown is on for Project Mercury's first attempt to put a man into orbit around the Earth.
Roger, thank you.
Astronaut Alan Shepard has successfully completed the nation's first manned rocket flight. A second and similar flight by astronaut Virgil Grissom has refined the technique. But minor modifications and frustrating launch postponements have kept an American astronaut from orbiting the Earth. Now, in the pre-dawn of February 20th, 1962, preparations are underway for the first American orbital mission. The astronaut is John Glenn, Jr. Glenn has sat out a dozen postponements in the last 2 months. Trouble in the guidance system, a problem with his oxygen supply, fall weather. But now everything is apparently ready. For Glenn, at the age of 40, this event is the capstone of a career which began only 20 years ago as a rookie pilot in the Marines.
My feelings are that this whole project with regard to space sort of stands with us now as if you want to look at it one way, like the Wright brothers stood at Kitty Hawk about 50 years ago, with Orville and Wilbur pitching a coin to see who was going to shove the other one off the hill down there. And I think that we stand on the verge of something as big and as expansive as that was. I think we are very fortunate that we have, should we say, been blessed with the talents that have been picked for something like this. And I think we'd be almost remiss in our duty if we didn't make full use of our talents volunteering for something that is as important as this is to our country and the world in general right now. I was brought up believing that you're placed on Earth here more or less with sort of a 50-50 proposition, and this is what I still believe. I think there is a power greater than I am that will certainly see that I'm taken care of if I do my part of the bargain.
John Glenn has named his capsule Friendship 7. As he slides into the cramped confines, he enters a new world. In this field of spaceflight, says Glenn, there are only a handful who understand, and they are not fearful. When the hatch is closed, he adds, it is a quiet moment, a good one. At Mercury Control Center, at the 18 tracking stations around the world, the efforts of more than 40,000 men focus on John Glenn. The entire nation waits and listens as the final checklist is called at Cape Canaveral.
Gantry is in launch position. There will be no smoking and a blockhouse until further notice. 57 seconds. Stand by to start ETI on my mark. Status check, pressurization. Blocks tanking. Have a blinking high level light. You are go. Water systems, go. Range operation. Mercury capsule, go. All pre-start power lights are correct. Eject Mercury umbilical. Oil evacuate. Mercury umbilical clear. Lights on. All recorders to fast, T-minus 18 seconds and counting engine start. You have firing signal. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, fire. Godspeed, John Glenn.
From the Bermuda tracking station come the words John Glenn has waited to hear.
You have a go at least 7 orbits. Roger. Understand go for at least 7 orbits. My status is excellent. I feel fine. This is Friendship 7. How you doing, Gordo? We're doing real fine up here. Everything is going very well. Over. Very good, John. You sound good. That was sure a short day. Time passes rapidly, huh? Now, that was about the shortest day I've ever run into. In the periscope, I can see the brilliant blue horizon coming up behind the approaching sunrise. Over. Roger, Friendship 7. You're very lucky. You're right, man. This is beautiful.
Early in the flight, land-based computers indicate a mechanical problem aboard Friendship 7. Glenn must now control his spacecraft's attitude in orbit. Ground instruments indicate the possibility of a loose heat shield on the capsule. Glenn could perish in the re-entry friction heat of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. As John Glenn races through his third and final orbit, the alert is passed to Mercury tracking stations around the world. During the crucial re-entry period, Friendship 7 is out of sight, out of range, and suddenly out of communication. As he begins re-entry, Mercury Control tries to contact him.
Friendship 7 is escape. Do you read? 7 is escape. Airplane 5. Keep talking now. Friendship 7 is escape. Over. Friendship 7 is escape. Over. Friendship 7 is escape. Over. Hello, Mercury Recovery. This is Friendship 7. Main chute is on green. Chute is out in reach condition at 10,800 feet and beautiful chute. Sighted Friendship 7 and are closing now for recovery.
After only 4 hours and 56 minutes and more than 81,000 miles of flight, Lieutenant Colonel John Glenn Jr. is home. Glenn's family is waiting for him at Cape Canaveral. He has orbited the Earth with apparently nerveless calm. But now, in this moment, his emotions suddenly break. John Glenn is the man of the hour, the man of the year. He is the Charles Lindbergh of his age. The nation's capital in the House of Representatives, astronaut John Glenn is accorded the ultimate tribute for his flight before a joint session of the United States Congress.
Exploration, knowledge, and achievement are good only insofar as we apply them to our future actions. Progress never stops. We're now on the verge of a new era, I feel. Today, I know that I seem to be standing alone on this great platform, just as I seem to be alone in the cockpit of the Friendship 7 spacecraft. But I'm not. There were with me then and with me now thousands of Americans and many hundreds of citizens of many countries around the world who contributed to this truly international undertaking voluntarily and in a spirit of cooperation and understanding. We are all proud to have been privileged to be part of this effort, to represent our country as we have. As our knowledge of this universe in which we live increases, may God grant us the wisdom and guidance to use it wisely. Thank you.
The public and the press have hailed the exploits of the American astronauts as among the great adventures of modern man. The word most frequently used has been heroic. However, when John Glenn himself returned to Earth after his journey through the heavens, he was asked if anything unusual, anything frightening had happened. And he answered, no, it was just another day in space. Mike Wallace for Biography.